I'm Rob Squire. I ran for Q at Army from 2004 to 2008. And I'm one of those guys that Q kind of gave a chance, as you were mentioning earlier. And he's undoubtedly the only reason I ended up at the Academy and in the Army and in where I am today, and definitely changed my life in a big way. And I think the big thing that was awesome about Q was that he wasn't just interested in making us better athletes, but he was concerned about us being better people and successful as cadets as well. And the one thing that always stood out to me is at the beginning of every, or end of every marking period at the Academy, he would always bring down our grades. And he would print out every single athlete on the track team's grades, and he had access to that. But our grades was, you know, 5, 6 classes, only about this much sheet of paper, so he'd cut them into strips. So he had this whole stack of strips, and he would highlight, go through with a highlighter and mark, you know, any grade you were not passing, if you were below like a C or something, not making your grade point average, and it was the racing stripes. So, and we all knew what our grades was, we had access to it, but he was taking the time to make sure we were getting the help that we needed, and were successful there. I'm actually representing John Anderson. He was a year behind me, ran at Army for Q with us, and he couldn't be here today. He's in Louisiana training to go to Afghanistan in a month or two here. But he sent this letter and asked me to read it. Where does one even begin to describe a man like Q? During our short time together, Q brought me so much. He introduced me to Willie Nelson, showed me every Taco Bell in the Northeast. His massive collection of 70s, 80s, and 90s tracksuits. The joy of Bear Mountain Milers, his massive golf ball collection, and the endless potential of a pizza box. Inside joke. But more importantly, Coach taught me that there's more to life than just running. Q taught me what it actually meant to be a scholar athlete and helped me pave the road for my military career. Though I'm only 3 years removed from my days at the Academy, I would undoubtedly not be where I am today without Q. My relationship with Q began just before my senior year of high school. I was sitting at home one night when I received a call from a graduate assistant at the Academy who asked if I would be interested in running at West Point. I responded, actually, I'm looking at Navy. I was clearly naive back then, but that abrupt response was probably the best mistake I ever made because it put me on the phone with Coach Q. I immediately fell in love with the quirky, grandfatherly voice I heard on the other end of the phone, even if he was ridiculing me for even thinking about the idea of running for the Naval Academy. And so began our friendship. As my senior year of high school progressed, many coaches called my house, but only one made a house call in person. Q drove down from West Point after practice one day, fighting rush hour on the New Jersey Turnpike, just to speak to my parents and I. I was impressed. Most of the coaches only told me about the number of runners they sent to nationals in recurring years or where the team was going for spring break. Q, on the other hand, told me about the challenges I would face in my first year at the Academy. Basic training, 23 credit hours of chemistry, calculus, English, history, gymnastics, no weekends until Thanksgiving, and the list goes on, and oh yeah, cross country. Despite these details and the fact that he single-handedly ate an entire plate of lemon squares during the visit, I immediately knew I could trust Q and that I could thrive under his tutelage as a college athlete. My first 2 years at West Point were a struggle to say the least. I was barely eligible and I spent more time rehabbing in the training room than on the track. I was frustrated and ready to leave West Point and run somewhere else. I remember walking down to practice the first day after spring break to let Coach Q know I wanted to leave. He was standing by the indoor shot put ring, chewing on sunflower seeds, and he must have read my face or something because as I approached, he said, "Don't even come over here, I don't want to hear what you have to say." And as he walked away, I was stunned. But then after reaching in his pocket for some more seeds, he said, "All right, let's do this." And we walked outside and I told him my plans. It was the first time I'd ever seen Q upset with me. I hadn't scored a single point at a track meet or run anywhere near as fast as I had in high school up to that point. but that's not what Q cared about. He told me he would help me if I wanted to go somewhere else, but he said, promise me you'll find your way back to the Army after college. Promise me you'll get your commission and look after America's sons and daughters when you're done running. Don't let your leadership skills go to waste. I didn't know what to say. Q was far more interested in me as a person than as a runner. And this was the last Q and I ever talked about me leaving West Point. And those words were all I needed to remind me why I needed to come back. Q retired just before my senior year, but his inspiration never left my side. Even after Q retired, he was the first person I thought of when running. He would always remind me to stick it to Navy for him and represent the black and gold. I was fortunate enough to call him 3 times that year with the news of beating Navy, and also to tell him I had won the gold at Penn Relays. After winning the Championship of America 5K at Penn Relays, I remember blowing past the officials and running straight to my bag so I could call Q. I was still gasping for air and dripping in sweat when Coach picked up and answered, "This better be good news if you're calling so late in a school night." He was just as excited as I was. We shared many more phone calls after that race, most of them not even about running. Q was there for me when I moved out to Colorado, ran at the Military World Championships, and then when I deployed to Iraq. I will miss our conversations, but I am thankful for all the time I got to spend with my coach and friend. So thank you, Coach. Thank you for keeping me honest and for never letting me quit. Thank you for challenging me to test my limits and be something more than just a pair of legs with lungs. But even more, thank you for being my friend on the track and off. I look forward to our conversation someday. I'll bring you some Taco Bell and maybe even some lemon squares. And you can save me a spot at the best Mexican joint up there in the sky, and we'll have some margaritas. Thanks.
My name is Mike Peterson, and I came up here to see you with Jerry, his first year up here. And we've got Ted Castaneda, who also came up here at the same time, and we have John Gregorio. And by the way, Ted and John were his first 2 All-Americans. And if you remember seeing the NCAAs, those guys raced Prefontaine right down to the wire at the NCAAs. And there's a lot of other guys I'm sure that are here, but the thing is we did a lot of special things up here at CU, and the years after in the 70s that reminded me so much of what happened in Paris in the 1920s when you had some of the greatest writers, artists of all times. And you had Frank Shorter up here. You had these 2 guys. I'd like to place myself somewhere in there. And we had Jack Batchelor come in here. And there were runners from all over the United States. And there were people that stopped in at the running store. And Jerry was an integral part of what went on here in the 70s. So I thought I would say that. And gosh, when I had a daughter who will be turning 40 here this year, so naturally she was this size when I was running here. And Jerry, we would put her in the pole vault pit, and Jerry would be timing and watching her while I ran around the indoor track. So my daughter would be watching me as I left this way, and I'd come back, and Jerry would be over here timing us. So, and every single time I've talked to Jerry, he has asked about my daughter Dana. And that's the kind of person that Jerry was. Every single time he said, "How's Dana doing?" And of course my daughter says, "Yeah, I remember Jerry," and so, and she wished she could have been here. I have, another funny thing is these were the kind of the hippie years up here. And so we ran against Air Force, and it's kind of ironic that he went to West Point because we all drew big peace signs on our arm when we went down to run against Air Force. And he let us do this, and he knew we were doing this. And of course we took 1 through 5. So it was the kind of the hippie free years. But I've got a story that is pretty interesting, both in my life and in, I believe this was my junior year when, oh gosh, Roger Hansen, these are some of the people, we were going to go do a workout, and so this was Jerry's workout. First of all, Jerry started the milers up here, and we've had tons of people run milers up here, and where we'd go out on the dirt roads, and Jerry would drive the van around, and he would drive to the next mile mark and jump out and read our times out for us, and then he would start the stopwatch and go to the next miler. We'd do 5 1-milers, and hundreds of people have done those milers out here. So he decided we were going to do a special workout. Now, the special workout was that we were going to actually go to the Poudre River, and we were going to raft down the Poudre River and run back and get the van. So this was during the season, and so he later said, well, I wasn't sure we would even make it under the bridge because there was so much water. He had never seen that much water in the Poudre River. So this is during the cross-country season, and so Roger Hansen, Dick Mortz, myself, and I can't remember who the other one was. And so we'd never been in a raft, and we all jumped in, and so we come up to the first big rock, and we go over the rock sideways, and we flip it, and we're all down the river trying to fight. We did have life jackets on, but we were fighting the raging river and slamming up against the rocks, and everybody was beat to poop. I mean, we got out of there, and so he said, well, somebody's got to run back up. He goes, Petey, you run back up and get the van. So I mean, I've got sores on my hips, on my ankles, on my knees, where I'd hit rocks, and it's just excruciating pain. So we drive back, and we get back, and he says, you know, I probably didn't think that one through. But I was talking to him, and he said, so what have you been doing? And I said, well, I just got back from the Grand Canyon. It was my 6th trip down the Grand Canyon. Since this raft trip, I've taken over 100 raft trips, bought my own raft, had gone down the Grand Canyon several times, and he said, last time I talked to him, he said, well, you'll have to take me down the Grand Canyon. And this was in last August. He goes, we'll have to get a permit and go down the Grand Canyon. And, you know, I was sure that we were going to have enough time, you know, to take another raft trip. But Jerry, you know, Jerry lives in all of us that knew him, and he was just such a superb person to each one of us. And he always asked about us and never talked about himself. And, you know, I tell you what, I cried when I heard that he had passed away, and I'm so very sad that we will not have him here, but I have great memories. Thank you.